Alright, well, this is not the type of video I usually make. Obviously, on this channel, I've never done any type of sports videos or anything regarding my teams. Figure it's not really my niche too much, but I have been a hockey fan for my entire life, and I have actually played when I was a kid, not at a high level. But as I scroll through the headlines today, see some of the comments on social media, um, it's clear that there's quite a few Oilers fans and media personnel in the NHL and around the sport that are incapable of having a rational conversation around this topic. And I figure somebody has to do it. And having lived in Edmonton, being an Oilers fan since I moved to Alberta 5 years ago, um, I figured I would try to um, embark on this from a rational perspective. And that is the talk about whether or not Connor McDavid ends up leaving the Oilers, whether he ends up requesting a trade out. So let's break it down. All right. This is the full conversation that nobody really wants to have. And bear with me, I have some notes here. As a rational fan of the Edmonton Oilers, if Connor McDavid ever decides he wants out, this is not just going to be about the trade return. It's more about what happens after. Because moving the best player in the world and in the game doesn't just change your roster. It changes the entire identity of the team. And see, we're talking about a generational talent. You don't replace a player like Connor McDavid. You absorb the loss and you try to rebuild your core in essentially one single move. So, if this ever becomes reality and he controls the destination with a full no move clause, here's what I would ask in a return. So obviously we cannot predict a situation we don't really have a full picture on. But I believe there are a few scenarios in which McDavid asks for a trade out of Edmonton and he's only going to go to a select few teams. And as much as it's going to annoy me to start with this one, because Toronto fans talk about this all the time, we do have to consider the possibility that at some point he may end up playing for his hometown team, or it might very well be a possibility that he asks for that trade to Toronto. And we're going to look at this from a rational perspective. And, we're not going to be looking at a blockbuster scenario necessarily, or looking for any of the Leafs stars necessarily in return. But here's my ask to at least help secure the Oilers, okay? So if it comes down to Toronto being the destination, we're looking at four guys: Morgan Rielly, Matthew Nyes, Joseph Woll, and Keith Petruzzelli. You're getting a top pair defenseman, a strong young forward, a potential starting goalie, and a prospective goalie who still might have a couple years of development in the AHL, but you're kind of bolstering a little bit of the future. And remember, you're not replacing McDavid. You're stabilizing multiple key areas instantaneously. The next one here is a little bit less likely, I think, but it might be something to be considered. It was mentioned on Bar Down from Jesse Pollock, so let's talk about it. The Montreal Canadiens. I don't think this one happens, but If it were the case, I believe here the price would skyrocket. And this is my asking price out of Montreal. I would want Cole Caulfield, Jacob Fowler, Ivan Demidov, Caden Gooley, and Arbor Jacki. Because here you're getting scoring, elite upside. Your future is bolstered in net with Jacob Fowler. He's proven to be nothing but spectacular so far. And of course, you're getting that defensive core to build around with Gooley and Jacki. Again, this is a massive return, but for a generational talent like Connor McDavid, it has to be. Just for the sake of history repeating itself, we have to look at the Gretzky theory, sending McDavid to the Kings, in which case a rational return would be Quinton Byfield, Mikey Anderson on D, Darcy Kemper, and a 2028 first-round pick. Again, same structure, forward, defense, goalie, and future. It's the only way you stay competitive. Now, this final possible package is not one I really want to talk about, but I think for the sake of conversation, we have to. And that's the possibility that he ends up with a very aggressive Vegas Golden Knights team. The problem with Vegas is that they're a win now team. They have an aggressive front office, but they're not really big on giving up core pieces. So we're likely looking at more of a return for future pieces, right? But nevertheless, my ask here would be Mark Stone, Shea Theodore, and a first-round pick in 2027 or 2028. Because even then, like I said, you're probably negotiating future picks or future prospects. But this is realistically the baseline for a generational player. Now, obviously, this goes beyond McDavid being traded, right? Because now we have to worry about the future identity of the Oilers. So the easy part here is Leon Draisaitl, obviously taking over as the captain. He's already kind of carrying that presence now. He's already setting that tone. And then you have to build your leadership core around him, which I would come to believe the options there to wear an A. You have obviously Nuge, Zach Hyman, Evan Bouchard, and Matthias Ekholm. Already kind of those presences in the locker room, and it would become more of a shared leadership model because, again, you can't replace McDavid, but everyone can kind of absorb a piece of what he brought to the team over the last 11 years. Now, following a trade of Connor McDavid, there's one other piece we really have to talk about. And obviously, we have to look behind the bench with that, because McDavid was a big advocate and big part of Chris Knoblauch becoming the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. He was the reason Nobby was brought in. And without Connor, his future looks bleak, if you ask me. Now, I don't know if this turns into a full reset in the coaching philosophy, whether you bring in a veteran coach to stabilize the locker room, or whether you shift towards a defensive system, a more offensive system. But whatever the answer is, the justification for keeping everything the same disappears without McDavid, right? And that's why this very conversation matters. A McDavid trade is not just a roster move. It's a complete transformation of the franchise. Your leadership, your structure, your identity, it's all going to change at this point. Now, let's not get carried away here and realize that there's still a very real chance that Connor decides he wants to stay in Edmonton for his entire career. And that's obviously the best case scenario. But if not, prioritizing winning the cup, this could be potentially what the roadmap looks like. So I want to hear from you. Are these trade packages enough in your mind? Who are you putting the leadership on? Who are you giving a letter? Does the coach stay or go? Oil country, please don't hate me. This is just a rational fan looking at the full picture. Cheers.